welcome to Speak Life Project with Lex. I'm so excited for what's to come in this episode. I am with a special guest. Her name is Christina Rosenly.
Hello.
You say hello.
Hello.
Before we dive in, I want to just say this. This new segment of Speak Life, I really wanted to show people their stories to you guys, because through our stories, we're able to help free each other in specific things. So when someone's here sharing a story, if you resonate with that, then there's something that unlocks in you. There's a freedom that takes place. And then you get to understand that when I share my story, there's a freedom in that, and then I can free others as well. So there's power in your voice and there's power in your story. And through these interviews, I want you to see that. And so I'm excited to dive right in. Thank you for tuning in. So Christina, I have Christina here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from?
Well, I'm from Marietta. I grew up in this local area.
Marietta what?
Ohio.
Okay.
And I grew up around here, and at 18, I moved to Parkersburg because I wanted out of Marietta, Ohio.
Where's Parkersburg?
West Virginia.
Okay.
I went from like this really, really small city to what I felt was like a bigger, like people didn't know everything about you, because I had a lot of like drug history and stuff like that. So I wanted out of Marietta so people would be out of my business. And so I got a place in Parkersburg. And essentially, I was the 18-year-old who had her own place. And so I would have people come to my house.
You were like the poppin' house.
Yeah, oh, we could party over here. And
Right.
my parents won't find out because it's in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And so...
Wait, so how are you like the oldest? Do you have siblings? Like,
yeah,
what?
I have 3 siblings. I'm the oldest. And then there's my sister, a brother, and another sister. And then at one point we had adopted 2 cousins.
So what is that in total?
So 6.
6. Wow.
yeah.
I'm the oldest as well.
Yeah.
So I understand.
I was
Were
the
you
oldest of all
bossy?
those. I was always put in charge, and they never listened.
Aw.
Just to be clear,
I
they
get
never
it.
listened. So like I would just get super frustrated.
You're like, all right,
I
just
was
be
like,
quiet,
no.
sit down. No.
Like get me in trouble all the time.
That's funny. Okay, so carry on. So you're oldest of 6, and you grew up in Marietta. So it's a smaller town than Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Not
moved
by
to-
much, but it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you grow up in church, or like?
No, I didn't.
What's your background with that?
I can remember when we were little, at one point we were at church, but it was one of those things where we just didn't go. And I even had one of my dad's friends would take us to a little small church every once in a while, and I can remember that. But we were not church family oriented for one reason or another. So I really didn't even know that lifestyle whatsoever.
Wow.
And
so you're the first generation then.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
And we're a big family. As far as like my dad's like one of 15.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I don't remember church ever really. I mean, I can
Being
remember them
talked about.
talking about like, you know, they were Baptist. So it was like you accept Jesus and that's all you need.
But that was it.
Yeah. But that was generally all I really heard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So didn't really grow up in church. Moved to Parkersburg at 18 or 17? 18. 18. I'm sorry. 18. And so now, okay, so you're the poppin' house where all your friends come over, party, drink, smoke, all that stuff.
Well, and I actually didn't do drugs until I was around 18.
I was gonna
Like,
say that.
Yeah.
So like, how were you introduced? Like,
Yeah, so-
how was your school life? Or were you like,
Yeah, I was, well, I was
Popular, the nerd,
18.
like what?
Oh, no, I was totally a nerd. But I was also 18 as a senior. So I was on my own as a senior. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was able to I didn't live at home.
Okay.
So I was going to school in Marietta, living in Parkersburg for my
Wow.
senior year. And we just kind of kept that hush so I could still finish off school. But it was one of those things where I was like introduced at that time frame at pot. So I started smoking pot my last year of high school. And I'd skip school like to go smoke pot. Like I never did any of that until then.
wow.
I barely made it through high school. So there's that. But then, you know, I after that summer of high school, after I graduated, I'm at Parkersburg and we're partying and we have a door of people coming in and out. I'm meeting all kinds of people in this realm of smoking pot and drinking. And through that, I was introduced to many other drugs, and then just certain kinds of people.
Right.
And so I had a friend that really liked getting tattoos. So I met this tattoo artist, and he basically told me one day when I was like, man, I'm short money on my rent or whatever. And he was like, you need to check this place out. And I was like, what is it? He's like, you can make your rent in like one night or less than a night. And I was like, all right.
And at that age, you're like, okay.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, cool, because then I can party and go and do. So, and he's like, and the best part is you can, you can smoke pot or whatever there. And I was like, really?
You're like, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, let's go check it out. Well, it was a strip bar.
Wow.
And that is when I got introduced into that lifestyle.
So Christina's story, part of her story is that she was a stripper. And we're going to say dancer, but she came out of it though. And so we're going to talk about her story and how she got into it. Like she just said, she went straight to the bar, right?
Yeah.
So, all right. So carry on from there.
So I basically went from right out of high school right into this bar. So I would say the most important years of your life of growing up and learning about the world, I grew up in a bar as a dancer. And so what I understood of life was only this. So how to handle problems, how to disassociate from problems, how to feel about myself.
Was in this environment.
Is in this environment.
Wow.
So where I was rejected before, I was now really accepted in this area, and I was thriving on that, and I could freely do drugs, and I got paid for it, essentially.
So what caused you to feel that rejection? Like, was it something in your childhood?
I was just a really scrawny kid growing up. I had glasses, and so I was just really picked on or bullied. And so I never really felt pretty.
Okay.
And I never really felt totally accepted. I mean, there were a group of people I was accepted with, but it was for reasons like convenience of partying or that connection of doing drugs or whatever, but it was never fully an acceptance.
Right.
And I had a good family, and it wasn't necessarily that there was a family issue per se, but it was more of like that. Like I didn't feel pretty,
like you were the nerdy,
or I was like, yeah. And then when I went into this, I was like,
oh,
it's different. Like oh, okay, yeah. Like, and attention is like the biggest thing there. I was getting that.
What caused you to get kicked out when you were in high school? Kicked out or whatever happened with that situation.
So
by yourself.
So me and my dad bumped heads a lot, and I was a really rebellious kid.
Okay.
And so it came to a head one night, and basically the decision was made that it was better for me to just move out.
Okay.
And for him and me, like, and I was 18, so I was like, I'm out.
You're like, I'm an adult
yeah.
now. Like,
so it was really me, like, just being like, I'm out. I'm 18. And so that's initially it for that.
Wow. So what job were you doing?
McDonald's.
Oh, okay. You started at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Minimum wage.
Yeah, totally. Like this McDonald's was high school. I started like 16 at McDonald's, and I was still at McDonald's, and I was like, this place.
So that's why when the tattoo artist presented this, you're like, okay, like I'm done with Mickey D's.
What do you mean I can make a paycheck in 1 hour? Like, yeah, it was like one of those things where the draw was I could do drugs there. I could make a lot of money, and it was essentially I was having fun partying. So to me, it was like transferring the party into pay.
Right.
So like
I mean, I
easy.
get it.
Yeah. So basically, I could make the money, turn around and get the drugs, and then turn around and make the money.
Again.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I was good. I never ran out of anything. So
Wow.
it was like, yeah. So that disassociation was easy to do because I would just use.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so how long did you do this? Like what?
I would say I started 18, and I would say around 21, 22, I was at the peak of like traveling around and doing it.
Okay, so share more about that. Like,
yeah,
so you started off at this one place that the guy told you about. You grew up there. You started to learn about life through the lens of that club. Yeah.
So basically, within my first year, the bar was owned by a guy in Columbus. So within that first year, he was like, hey, why don't you come up to Columbus? And from there, it just was like I could get a job anywhere. And then I was able to like just go wherever. So I would go, along the East Coast. and just hit the road and show up places. People paid me to be there.
Wow.
So it just started to be really easy. And it was something I enjoyed.
Right.
So I got really good. And so then I was able to get a job anywhere and stay as long as I want, and then jet as soon as I wanted. So it got to the point of like, it was enjoyable and beneficial, and until it wasn't.
Right. Like it got old after a while.
Right. Well, and it got dangerous. There were situations I got into. Things happened.
So what were some really low places that you got to where you're like, I don't know if I could do this forever? Did you want to do it? Like, what did you ever think of doing something else, or what?
I would have moments where I would be driving and I'd be like, if you're real, you would get me out of this. And it was like, I'd have these conversations that now I look back and I realize were God and me having these talks. But it was like, I'd be having these conversations with myself of like, if you're real, then why am I still in this? Why is this life so miserable? And basically, I hit a point when I got molested.
Okay.
And I got in a situation that, for lack of better purposes, I put myself in.
Right.
And that happened. And then I didn't trust anybody anymore.
So is that the place
that was probably the lowest?
Where you're like, okay, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore.
And it was like something like, it's so weird because I was so ashamed because I put myself there.
Right. That you're like, it was my fault.
It was
like,
my fault. I should and for the longest time I blamed myself for that because I put myself there. I was in this environment, and that was where I was having these conversations like, if you're real, then why this happened?
Right.
If you're real. And then it would be like, well, I put myself there. Well, not always God's voice. The enemy's voice is just as loud in that environment. So a lot of times that guilt and shame really played on me. And so I didn't talk about it.
I was going to say, did you tell anyone about that?
I told one person.
How can you encourage someone out there because there's so many girls that don't talk about it because they
Yeah. So I want to say first and
their
foremost,
fault, they think.
yeah, I want to say first and foremost, it is not your fault. Like, it is not your fault. No matter what the situation is, if you do not consent to it, it is not your fault. If you don't even want to do it, but you do it anyway, still, it's something that you can trust assured that there's somebody out there going, you know what? I'm with you. It's not your fault. And that was wrong. There are people that are going to be supportive of you no matter where you're at. And there is a way, and there's for people for you to reach out to. And I had one friend that was still in the same environment as me, and I was able to reach out to her. But it was one of those things where that guilt and shame only broke off when I came to Christ.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I'll be real. Like, the only time that it actually broke off was when I fully accepted Jesus.
It was kind of just something that you could bury.
Yeah. So it was not just bury. Like, it was something I just ignored. Like it never even happened.
So that was one of the low spots or the lowest is when that happened. Yeah. So in that environment, did you have friends? Like, did you have people did you have relationships?
Yeah.
Were you in relationships? Like, what?
I dated a guy for a long time, and he broke my heart. And then I was like, you know what? I don't like men anyway. You know what I mean?
Like a man hate.
Yeah, I really didn't like men were gross to me because I saw the ugliest part of them. And so I was like, I just really, so for me to even date him, like, it took a long time for me to even say yes. And then the other guy, I didn't even meet in the bar. And I ended up getting pregnant by him.
Wow.
And ended up getting an abortion. I shame around that because I didn't want to. And I will say this, like, I was in a position where I went there to get it. And I told the lady there that I did not want to do this, that I was really, and even though I was separated from that guy and telling her this, she did not help me.
Wow.
That happens a lot.
Right.
So when you're seeking out, like, don't believe that you can't walk out, because I could have, and I know I could have, but I still went through with it out of fear.
Right.
And you don't have to do something you don't want to do. And that was the thing that I didn't tell myself a lot.
Yeah.
Is I don't have to do this. And when I finally got to the point of, like, I'm done, because I even pregnant and then getting an abortion, I still went to work in California.
Wow.
And when I got to that point of like, okay, I'm done. I need to go home. I need to get out of this. It was one of those points where I was just like, I finally had just made the decision to do better for me.
Because it was just like
like I'm in this. I'm still in this because I'm choosing to stay in it. Like if I want to get out of it, I've truly got to get out of it. And the ironic part was when I came home, I went right back into it for like a few weeks just to get the money to get rent taken care of. And that's the thing. I built up. I had to say no to a lot of things right off the bat in order to save that money up and do that. But I paid my rent. And I just decided to go get a job, and I went and I got a job, and that first paycheck, I ain't gonna lie, hurt because I was like, oh my gosh. But I kept going, and I knew that it was better than the environment that I was in.
Right.
And I knew that there was something more, even though I didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to do better for me, and I wanted out of that lifestyle because all it did was bring darkness and
like you just felt like
I thought I looked good. I look at pictures now, like back then, and I looked how I felt. I was sick looking. I was translucent is the best word I could say. Like you could see, like it would look like bruises, but there were not bruises. It was like I was just sick.
Right.
From drugs and I didn't realize I didn't look good. I thought I did. So I look back at that and I'm like, I had made the decision based on not wanting the darkness that I was around. Did it free me from the darkness completely? No. I still struggled. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And until I came to a connection with my husband, now husband, and met a church family, did I know there was even more out there. And that's the best I can to describe it. Like they introduced me to a life that I didn't know was existing. Like they were a very good church family. I didn't know those people existed.
Wow.
Yeah.
So backtracking a little bit, what was the mindset that you had after the abortion took place? Like what did you feel afterwards?
I knew I killed a baby. And no matter what anyone says, after having an abortion, they're fine. No, they're not. Like you have the mental torment of the fact that because you took a life, and that life was in you, and you know what I mean. Like that life had no choice but for me to do what I did,
right? And
whatever it was I chose. And in this case, I knew what I had done was still not right. So I had like this mental torment, and that mental torment came more using and more trying to get out of
numb it
like
pain.
Disassociate me from life in general. Like so the further I went, the best way I can describe it is I didn't have a shut off. I just drank and drank and drank and drank and drank and drank until I passed out.
Wow.
Or I would use and use and use, and there were times where I was like, man, I hope I don't wake up.
Wow.
Like it was
so you just wanted
like I was not happy, and I was mentally tormented.
Wow.
From what I did.
And so in that environment, did you want family? Like, did you yearn for not family from like kids, but like more like friends that were really there for you, or were you a loner? Like what? I know you mentioned the two relationships, but like friends wise.
I would say that I was okay with one friend, and I was okay with being, I wouldn't say alone. I would say I needed to have somebody around me. Like I needed that friend. And I'm thankful that I had that one person. But at the same time, I didn't want any kind of like substantial relationship with anybody. Like I didn't, it was very surface, except for that one person. And that one person knew exactly how I felt about things and everything. And I felt safe enough I could do that. But I did not feel safe with anybody else, really. Not even people close. I didn't feel like I could really tell them what I was really thinking or what I really did. Like I didn't tell my family for the longest time. I told them I lost the baby for like the longest time because I was so ashamed. But yeah, I would say that I had huge trust issues.
Right. I mean, I could imagine all the things that you've seen.
Yeah.
Now, did your family know that you were like involved in all of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was wondering,
they disowned me for a little while, and I get it. I don't blame them at all. But they still, like, if I was to come around, I was still their daughter. You know what I mean? And I think the initial response was they were just really upset with me. They didn't like it, and I didn't care.
Right.
And that was what it came down to, was just decisions
do
I
what
made.
you
Yeah, I
wanted to
did
do.
what I wanted. I was 18. I knew everything. Or 20-something. I knew everything.
Right. You mentioned that you would go in your car and at times you would say, okay, God, if you're real, show me.
Yeah.
What got you to that place? Like, what had you thinking that way? Did anyone ever say anything for you to?
So ironically enough, there was a guy who would come into the bar, and he picked me out of the group, and he would be like, hey, you need to sit here. And I didn't like sitting and talking to people. So, and I think he picked up on that. And so he was like, he would make me sit down, and he would be like, here's $20, sit down and talk to me. And he would go, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. And I'd be like, whatever. Cause you kind of heard that. He's like, but you need to know Jesus. And I would be like, oh my gosh, this guy. And so it was that guy who came in for like 4 months, and that's all he would do. He'd come in, make me sit down, give me $20 to sit down and talk to him.
Wow.
And he would be like, you don't belong here. You need to find Jesus. And it was like, I tolerated it. I would go on. But then, it was that guy that whenever I was alone, or ever I'd have those conversations in the car, or that I would be like, I don't belong here, or I don't belong in this life, or I need to do better. Like, it was that seed
that was planted.
was planted that got me thinking about it. And I'm like, if you're real, God, then why? If you're real, God, then do this. And it's like, I know it would sound like I was like, I want something from God, but it was like I was really just calling out. And I look back on that, and it was like I was literally calling out to God for God to intercede for me and come to me and help me. And I didn't even know that he was with me the whole time.
Wow.
He was with me the whole time.
So you said before that there's like a stigma when it comes to the word stripper.
Yes.
And so that's why I said dancer.
Yes.
What can you say to kind of like, because I know we have that stigma to where every stripper is a prostitute or a hooker or,
So I have a really strong feelings about using the word stripper, because a lot of people will use word association. Stripper in movies is always like this hooker or this person who's like really, really just nasty, or like, yeah. Even some of the movies that kind of like try to make good about it don't really portray it. So people associate that when you say the word. So I always try to use word dancer because it's less abrasive, and it doesn't give people the chance to put you in a category. The environment that I saw was not like what you see in the movies. We may have had 1 or 2 girls that were prostituting themselves around different places. But for the most part, it was like college kids trying to make tuition or get their books, or some local girls who were just like looking for some money, and they would come and go. And then you had the people that were making careers of it and that have been around it for a long time. And then they know nothing else, and the money's so good that they just don't think they can make it. So the environment that I saw versus what is the stigma around the word is not the same. I dated 2 people the entire time I was a dancer. And that was my extent of relationships. Right. And a lot of people will assume that you're sleeping around. I did not see that a lot out of even the girls. Some of them are married. Some are like with kids, and they're just doing their life. And it's not at all what is associated with that word.
Right.
So,
which that helps so that people aren't like people that may have came from that lifestyle, and you just automatically say that it can trigger something,
Yeah.
So I just wanted to
I love
bring that out there. But
thank you.
So God took you out of a life of darkness from feeling rejected. So you tried to find places to accept you, and suicidal, abortion, like feeling. So now, where are you now? Like you're a mom.
Yes, I'm a mom of 2.
Because there's people out there that think they can never be a mom because of that. Like,
well, I was one of those people.
Else?
Like, I didn't think I couldn't be a mom. I didn't want to be. Like, I was like, I will never get married. I will never have kids. And it was so funny because God will do things. Like, you look back and you're like, oh, that was God. I remember meeting my husband, and I was like, I could see myself marrying this guy and having a couple kids. And it's like, That's so weird because
Okay.
that's exactly what happened.
Right. Wait, let me backtrack. So how did you get to know Christ? How about we start there?
So I was introduced through my husband. He was like, my parents are really religious, and so I was like, okay. So I met them and we started going to church.
You thought they were really religious?
Yeah, like, well, because I wasn't. Mm-hmm. So it was like one of those things where I was introduced, and I had a great experience with the church, but then I started helping my mother-in-law and children. So I wasn't really in much of the services. I didn't really have the impact that I've had once I threw myself in to services. But it was one of those things where I met him and I had an experience of church and I had a touch of God. I'd seen things and I couldn't explain, but I didn't know what they were.
How did you meet him?
I decided to go work at a level 3 facility for juveniles.
Oh.
Seems so extreme. But I was looking for something that took a lot of my time.
Right.
And it did. So I had to go through months of training. And that's where I met my husband.
Wow.
He was working there. And I was about 2 months into training. They're like, hey, you're going to be in this area with this group of people. And I go and I meet him. I actually meet him on my birthday. And it was like, ting. Like, wow. I was like, I'm not dating nobody. Oh, hi. You know what I mean? Like,
was there something with him that was set apart from like what you've seen before in men? Like you knew he was different?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I even, once we started dating, I even tried to break it off because I'm like, you're too good for me.
You're too nice. Like, what's wrong?
Like, I'm telling you, I'm too bad for you. And I saw the response that he had to that. And I was like, okay, wait. He was like, he's basically, he talked through that lie. He's like, I will be the judge of what I think is too good or not good. Wow. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, fine. So we like worked through that. And it was like, all the while, I'm still struggling with things like addiction and stuff like that. So, I mean, like I said, it's not like I went from not being a dancer, you know, into the real world. I was still that mindset in the world.
So yeah, that's what I want to touch on next. Like, so coming from that with that mindset, and then you're starting to change your life, and then you meet the church world. Like, did it automatically change, or were you? Yeah,
no.
What was
funniest
the mindset
thing
like?
The funniest thing was when you go through this training of like how to deal with these kids that are emotionally like abused or things like that. You have to go through training about anger management and stuff like that. And I was like, I didn't know I was angry. Like I went through all this stuff. I'm going through all this training and it's like therapy. I was like, whoa. Like, you know what I mean? Like I
feel like I'm supposed to be helping you, but
like this is helping me. And then I remember when I first went in there, that the first cabin I went into, that's what they called them. And I was in with the girls. I sat down and they all thought I was one of the kids there. I was like, one of the helpers. And so, but I remember just going through that training of like, it was like the first set of like self-awareness. Like I have issues that could affect other people. Like, and I didn't know how to handle myself. So I didn't know, like, you couldn't just fight it out. Like,
we couldn't just like,
you couldn't just throw fists and be
let's
done.
Go outside, meet me
yeah,
outside.
like you want to, let's go. You couldn't do that. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. So then like they were teaching us how to talk these kids through. I was like talking to myself. I'm like, oh man, like, so that was the first awareness. I wouldn't say it was a Jesus encounter. I would say it was a self-awareness of common sense. Like you can't throw down when you're angry, period. And then I would say after that 2 months of training, I met my husband and we start talking and then, you know, we go on a date and then he was like, you want to meet my parents? And then so I'm like super nervous because he's talked them like they're religious people and obviously I'm not. So I'm like so nervous at their house that I just talk nonstop. Like I was so nervous. And their first response about me was, well, she talks a lot. Still true today. Then it was like inviting me to church. And then I meet a wonderful guy, pastor there, and they accept me. But I don't tell them anything. Like, so you have to understand, I hid this. And every place I went, there would be somebody that would see me or know me, and they would tell like either my employer.
So it's like you couldn't like.
I couldn't escape.
The past.
Yeah, I could not escape.
Were you saved at this point?
No.
Okay.
I would say not. I mean, I would say not.
You kind of just knew of.
I knew of. I knew there was a lifestyle that I had never seen. That's how I would approach it. I felt like I accepted Jesus, but I would say later in life I realized I really didn't because I was still battling I was still lying. I was still in bondage with addiction. And I was hiding it from people. And I would be ashamed of my past, and I would hide it. So I would never really truly tell you who I was. Or you would never really get to see who I really was, or even know anything more than what I,
from.
like
Right.
the surface me. Oh yeah, I'm great. Like if you meet me now, you would never know my past because
Right.
I'm living different now. But then it would be like, there's something about her. She's just not telling me everything.
She's mysterious.
Yeah, like I would hide a lot. I would not be very forthcoming. I did get honest with my husband now. Like I did tell him, you know, hey, look, I have a history. I was a dancer. I told him before found out about me. And then it was like, I mean, I had someone's mom who son I dated call be like, this girl's dancing. And I wasn't even dancing anymore. But and so then I had that happening at the job where they're like, well, if you're doing this, you need to quit. Or I'm like, I'm not. Well, if we find out, like I was always found out about that.
How did that make you feel?
I was super ashamed. I was super embarrassed. Like I
it almost
tried.
brought all this stuff
yes.
back up.
And it was like that lifestyle would never leave me alone. Would never leave me alone. It would never, like I could never escape it. Because as soon as someone found out about it, I would see the perversion of men. And I cannot say that enough. Like if you find out somebody's history, if it changes how you treat them, they see it. They see it.
Especially in the church.
Yeah, they see it and they feel it, and it changes. It brings shame on them, and they let the enemy talk to them rather than Jesus.
That's good, because like so many times you hear in the church where someone says, "Oh, did you see that girl who had the skirt on, or the girl who's the
it's
like
see how she's dressed?"
Yes, and then it gets to them, and instead of like loving on them and showing them a better way, you're gossiping, and then it gets back to them, and then they're like, "This is exactly why I don't go to church."
Well, even someone like me, like I'm going to tell you something about how women dress. All right, so someone like me who came from the bar life didn't know tank tops that were low cut were not appropriate until a man told me, hey, you probably should wear shirts that cover more because, you know, you're showing a lot.
There's a way to say it out aloud.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
but it took a long time. But meanwhile, like people were probably chatting it up about how I was dressed, and I just didn't even know any better. For me, like I thought it was normal. So
I mean, there's a difference between knowing and not knowing.
Yeah, and I just didn't know.
Right.
So it's like one of those things of like where a judgment comes from just hearing something or seeing something based on what you actually don't go up and talk to the person.
Right.
Or I can say after having that lifestyle and coming into different environments and different ranges of like not Christ in it, but still better environment, and then having Christ and being a better environment, and to another church where I get an encounter with Jesus.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so we went from the past to the middle where you were doing better, but still not
struggling.
really facing the past and struggling. Now, when did you meet Christ? Like what?
So I was married 7 years.
Wow.
Before I
really having like a conversion.
Yeah, and before we even started to try to have a child, and I was awful. Like at so many things I would relapse. I would like my husband, poor husband.
He was really patient.
But he was, and he loved me in spite of, and I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful he never gave up on me, because I had a lot of people that gave up on me and he didn't. And I even tried to run away from him, and it came close. But it was one of those things where I just knew, no, this is right. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so we worked through things, and we tried another church, and that didn't work out, and I was done. But I had a friend, and she was like, you need to check out this other church. And I was like, okay,
I'll try one more time.
I'll try one more time, whatever. She would not leave me alone. Now, mind you, I'm struggling with addiction at the time, and no one really knows it but me and the person that's helping me get the drugs. You know what I mean? That's it.
Wow.
And trying to do life better. So then I have Ava, and for 2 years, I do great. And then I go to this church, and then it didn't work out. And then I have a friend who's like, well, you ought to check this out. Well, I had slipped back into secretly smoking pot at that time, and nobody knew it. And
you
so
just kind of do it on the low.
Yeah, I was a loner stoner.
A loner stoner.
And so I went with my friend, and I went into this church, and I had never heard this kind of music. I'd never seen praise and worship like this. And I looked at her, I'm like, this is not a church. This is a concert. What are you talking about? This place is insane. There's like fog and lights and stuff. Like this is, and their music's really good. It's not like hymnal or K-Love. K-Love music. And nothing wrong with it. It just, for me, it never really spoke to me. Like it was very much, I could hear it on the radio. I could hear it at church. You know what I mean? And so I have this like, oh my gosh, this is insanely good music. And then I realized my buzz is gone.
Wow.
I was sobered
So
during the praise and
high.
worship. Like I came high, and I was sobered during praise and worship. I was like, what the heck?
Wow.
And so then I was like, okay. And then Dennis comes up and Pastor Dave comes up, and then Pastor Dave talks about
So these pastors come up too.
yeah.
Okay.
And he talks about being a former heroin addict or heroin dealer or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that's my people. Like, I know this kind of crowd.
Like, wow.
Like, this makes sense to me. And but it was like that message of his past and what he came out of. He literally dipped into my world and showed me that that you could come out of it.
The power of your story.
Yes.
So the power of his story changed your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's what got my attention. And then, for that first year at the church, I started cleaning up. I just started saying, you know what, I need to do this. And I would say into the second year, it's when I started being truthful. And I was off I was on pills too. Like I was off of everything. I just quit them. My doctor was like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't recommend that, by the way, because I could have had like major problems. Yeah. But I went from secretly using, living a double life, to being completely open and honest and throwing myself into it. I walked away from every single person and thing I knew in order to throw myself into something that I knew I wanted. And it was this encounter with Jesus that I only could get through total submission. Like I had to make the choice to completely walk away from everything I knew and say, I'm going to try something completely radical. And it was that moment that I had to trust the people that I were around. About a year in, I gave my testimony. Now, how I give my testimony now and how I gave it then, more of it was about freedom. Yeah.
Right.
It was like a dump. I just told everything.
I did this and I did
it was
that,
a little shocking for some, but it was like one of those things where I needed to do that in order to get freedom.
To face it, right?
Yeah.
To face the past.
Yeah. So once I did that, then the growth came of how to use my testimony in situations where I'm like, hey, you're not alone. Hey, you can get out of that. Like, that's important. You can get out of that.
Right.
And you can make a better life for yourself. And no matter how much money you made then, God will provide enough for you out of that. That was what really got me, was the more I walked away from it, the more God provided along the way, where I wasn't uncomfortable anymore with the life of being normal paychecks or having a car that, may need maintenance and just, things like that. Like you just don't think about when you're in this lifestyle because you just be buying it.
Right.
Now you have to save.
Yeah. You have to endure. You can't.
Yeah. So, and then facing things. So the thing about coming to Christ is you think, I'm going to go from this to this and it's going to be great.
You think it just
you think it's like bam. And listen, there's an initial like bam. And I would say that happened. It was this encounter, and I had this initial, and there was this freedom, and things are going. But then God's like, okay, now let's look at this, and now let's face this. Now, when you deal with people,
that's a whole nother.
Now, when you deal with people, you've got to deal with people like I would deal with people, like Jesus would deal with people.
Like you said, we can't fight.
Yeah, we can't just throw down in the church parking lot.
I'm let you know.
Yeah, so it was like one of those things where I was like, I had that initial yes, freedom to hold up. I gotta look at this.
You're like, Jesus, hold me back, Lord.
Like I just want to punch her. Like what I mean? Like you can't do that. But it was like those issues weren't necessarily that person. It was you. And I had to look at me. And so when I started to really look at my
Like in the mirror?
Yes, at my specks in the eye, that I started to realize that, hey, I can't go any further and I can't do anything for Christ if I don't face these things.
Right.
And I came to that point of like, okay, I would call it the rebellious teenager stage. Like I didn't want to do stuff, but I had to face like, okay, I have an issue with dealing with people when I have an authority figure trying to tell me, hey, you can't do that. And if it's a man, like I didn't realize I had some men issues, like until I had these authority figures trying to tell me, and I was like, hold up, like I know more than you. Like, you know what I mean? Like
something that would rise up.
Yeah, it was totally teenage rebellious. I would call it the teenage years of my Christian walk, because I was like, I wanted to stay in this little area back here of the beginning. And God was like, no, I want to take you further.
But we have a choice, right?
Yeah.
We have a choice to either stay there or to actually face it.
Yeah.
Because there are some people that never move on from that place.
And I would say once I did start doing that, that's when I really started freedom.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Going
That's
on the journey of healing.
Yeah. Like the stuff that, you heal off the very top, you still have that inner stuff that you have to face, that shame had to go away. I was so ashamed of so many things, and I had to face them like, hey, this is a lie. The enemy wants to hold that over you. Like you were this and you did this. And the enemy will be really good at doing that, even in your church environment, even as you're trying to walk through with Christ. The enemy's still there trying to bring you back.
Right.
And you can get through it, but you've got to get through it with truth.
Go ahead, tell somebody out there, girl. I'm like,
but I had to come to a point where I was like, you know what? Yeah, I did do that. And you know what? So one of the things that was really great was when I gave my testimony, I had no more enemy trying to hold that over my head, because they all knew
Everyone knew, so you couldn't
they all knew it.
That's
so
good.
They didn't care. So if somebody was to show up and be like, I know that girl, she was this, they would already know, and they could know, they'd be like, we know. And they were okay with where they put me. So now where I'm at is I'm in leadership in church, and I'm leading ministries.
So you dove right in.
Yeah.
Like,
so I threw myself in, and I just said, your will, and doing it. And I ended up in leadership. I didn't try for leadership. I ended up in there. And God makes room for you in those environments when you do that. So when like Pastor Dave always says, your gift will make room for you.
Right.
And that happened. I'm a testament of that. Like basically I submitted and I just did. And I ended up creating a ministry. I ended up over a ministry. It's one of those things where God restored.
He redeemed you.
Yeah. God restored everything I could have done into what I'm supposed to be doing now.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so through that, the restoration that took place and you jumping into leadership, and you getting it all out there so that there's no fuel, how can you encourage someone out there that is either just got out of that lifestyle, or maybe they're thinking about coming from that lifestyle? How can you encourage them to keep going, or to take that step? Like, what can you do to...
Well, the first thing I will say is you have to make that step. So just walking through church doors was a really, really hard thing for me, because I was like, if they knew. So I would say the first thing you want to do is shut that down, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you've done. It's about what you're going to do forward. So I could have stayed in there the past, or I could just try to go forward. And when I made that decision of just going to church, that's when I would say things really started to change for me. And I would encourage you to just come, just give it a chance. Don't worry about where you're at and where you're coming from, but more of like where you want to be, and if you know that there's something more out there, you're going to go for it. Well, in this case, there is something more for you out there, and it's what Jesus has for your life and what he can do through you. So you making that decision of just walking in is going to be the first step. The second step is to let your guard down, and
how can they trust again?
Yeah, like you have, that was the hardest thing for me.
Right.
So I would say I would have to face the fact that I had that trust issue and be like, you know what? No, I'm going to give this a shot. And people will mess up. People will fail because they're still people. The greatest thing about coming into a church and a church family is you've got people that know that when you mess up, all you have to do is be like, I'm sorry. And I forgive you, or do you forgive me? And you move on and you keep going forward. So I would just say keep going, because that was the thing that was the most impactful for me was I just had to keep going no matter what. I knew that I had encountered something that was changing my life. And even on days when I was like, okay, I can't
do this.
I was like, I'm still going. And so I would say walk through the doors and just keep going. Like just keep coming and keep pushing forward, because whatever comes at you is stuff that you're going to work through, and it's better on the other side.
Right.
So
what if they say, oh, but the money's so good, how do I give that up?
Yeah, so that's
can you say
another
about
trust
that?
issue. You're going to have to trust that that environment's bad for you. That environment's unhealthy. That environment's unsafe. You're going to have to just look at it and be like, you know what? I know that the money's good here, but life's going to be better over here. And what it ultimately come down to for me was I knew my life would be better if I got out of that.
Well, and the peace you probably,
The
experienced.
bondage that held me in that I don't have anymore, and the peace, joy, and love, and this just the life that I have now, I'm totally thankful because I trusted enough to say, you know what, I may not make this money, but it'll be okay. And it did. It ended up being okay. God puts divine relationships in your path, and things will work out.
What was the story that you were talking about with the harvest and the...
Oh, so I was in Matthew 13:23, and it's Jesus talking about the parable of the seed and the sower. And what that parable was talking about is the grain was growing and the weeds were in there, and that the farmers wanted to cut it down, and he was like, no, leave it. And I was really curious. I'm like, well, how do they not know it was a weed? So I looked it up, and at that time in that area, the weeds that grew were 80% grown before they realized they were seed, or they were weeds. So
crazy.
Yeah. So that's why they didn't know it was a weed. And by then, Jesus, he said that the guy's like, no, don't pull it out, because you'll pull out the harvest. And at the same time, and you'll ruin the harvest. So just let them grow. And Jesus was basically speaking that the earth is the world, and the weeds are of the world. And the seed, that good seed, the harvest, is Jesus and Jesus's people. So as you're growing in Christ, and as you're going through and the weeds are still there, you take the weeds first, you bundle them up to burn them, and then you harvest the seed. And Jesus was just really showing me that basically as you're going through life, that the weeds are going to be there, the world's going to be there, but you can gather that stuff, you can burn that stuff, you can get rid of that stuff, and then you can have the harvest. And that harvest is so important, because that's what's speaking life to us, is the people that are Christ people and Christ himself. So it's like that moment of reading that, I was like, that's what my testimony is going to do. Like I had to go through all of this stuff, and I had to let the weeds grow a little bit so we could remove them, so we could identify that's a weed. Yeah. And that this is the harvest, and that we could bundle up this weed and let the harvest be harvested. So all of these people that I have encountered through this journey of coming out of this lifestyle has been a good seed. But in the meantime, I had to let the weeds grow and identify them after to cut them down,
the root,
and get them out. And I had to get rid of those weeds before I could get to the harvest.
That's good. So when you were talking about how when you went into the church, you couldn't, you had to be sober. You had to face those things head on. And
I couldn't be like a surface person. I had to be open. I had to be transparent. I had to receive. I had to be willing to receive. So yeah, I had to face those weeds in order to even get the harvest. And so people could sow into me. But if I didn't face this stuff, and if I didn't catch this and pull it out and bundle it and burn it and get rid of it, if I didn't do that, then the weeds would have smothered me and taken away the harvest. So,
but you had to yield to the process, yield to what he was doing.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was beautiful.
Yeah. In the end, you have
the harvest. You
the
get
harvest.
to enjoy the
and I can honestly say that the harvest is ever growing. So like we have this season, and now the harvest is a lot of work, by the way, because, I don't know if you've ever had to harvest anything, but it's a lot of work. So you have that, and then you have a new season. So God is always continuously revealing stuff to us and showing us stuff, and we still have to work through it. Like it's never
done. It's never
done.
one and done.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. Like you
done.
have to go through a season of this, and you get to a point, and God's like, hold on, let me show you something else. Because he wants you to be like him, and he wants you to love like him, and he wants you to show his people the harvest, even with their weeds growing. So
that's good. And we're always learning and growing and have to be teachable and be corrected so that we can
being
stay on
corrected
point.
is fun.
Oh.
But it's worth it.
It is worth it.
So, but yeah, I'm really thankful that that I was at a place where they allowed my weeds to kind of grow too, because that's important. Because even though they see that part of me, they knew that they had to let me figure it out too. So that was
finding
important.
the right family, church family is important.
Finding the right place. So I would say, like, for me, it was Pastor Dave, because I related to his testimony. So for me, that spoke to me. So it's not necessarily what church, it's where you find Jesus speaking to you.
And also,
I think that's important.
You're free to be you. Because there's some churches that don't want you to grow. And if you are at a church like that, then leave. But if you're at a church where your leaders want you to grow and they're pouring into you and they're correcting you, correction, like we said, it's hard, but it's not bad. We need to be corrected so we know where we're headed. But
because they don't want your weeds to outgrow your harvest, because if that happens, then your harvest is destroyed.
Right.
And that's a perfect example of a parable with Jesus speaking and telling a story. And I think in that particular book, there's like 7 stories of parables, and it's like the people weren't getting it. And I'm like reading it now, and I'm like, the earth is the world. And like it just gave me that freedom, though, to be like, you know what, I can just go ahead and just tell it. It's my testimony. It's not who I am anymore.
Right.
And maybe it'll help somebody. So like share this and show this to somebody. Like just be like, hey, look, check this out. This girl got out of it, so you can too.
Yeah.
Whatever
if
it is.
Can do it for you. He can do it for you too.
So if it's like drugs, or if it's like the environment, or even if it's like a bar environment, because all bar environments are the same. Yeah, they're the same. There might be a little difference of what's going on in there, but they're generally the same. The people are lost. They're broken. They're trying to find something. They're trying to numb something. Right. Show them this and be like, look, the freedom that came to her can come to you too. It doesn't matter how far back they feel like they've gone. There's always a forward. So it's super important.
It's a faith walk. Yeah. It's a trust walk. When you trust in God, even though the money may not be as good, he knows that, he sees that, but he's going to provide for you, right?
Right.
Amen. So this is awesome that we got to hear Christina's powerful story. I hope that encouraged you out there. For all the people that have come from a life of sin, or a life that you think that there's no redemption from that, this is a perfect story for you to see that God restores everything and then some. And before we close, I want you to share about now you as a mom, homeschooling your children, like investing in the next generation. Because I want them to see that you can be a mom, you can be a parent again. Or if you're not, you can be. God can redeem you to the point that you are a great loving person again, that you can have relationships with people when you come from this lifestyle.
So I have always, like, one of the things I keep saying is, if God only saved me so that I could have a child that would change the world, then that's enough. Because I see my children, and I'm just so thankful, because there was a time that I felt like that I'll never be any more other than what I was. And you can. And I love my children so much. And I'm so thankful that God gave them to me, and that I'm able to raise them in this environment versus, a lifestyle that would have been a little more challenging for them and unsafe for them, and things that can happen. The drug-free life, like that was huge for me. So I just want to encourage you that you can, and you'll be thankful. You know what I mean? You'll be thankful that you have turned such a life that your children will never see that.
Right.
And that was the biggest thing for me. My children don't, like, I had to tell my daughter this, my history a little bit. And she actually looked at me, now she's 13, and she actually looked at me and said, you know what, Mom, I don't even know that person. So it doesn't matter. So and that's what I want for my children, is I want them to say, you know what, yeah, that person might have a history, but that's not who I know. And that goes for anybody they meet. That the compassion that they have is the fire of having that compassion for me to be like, no, you don't know them, is the same thing that they have even for me, as a beautiful testament of how I'm raising them.
Right.
But also how much God has touched them. And I'm thankful for that.
And what about this homeschooling group? Because now not only are you pouring into your kids, but you're helping for the next generation in that aspect as well.
So one of the things I after COVID happened, and homeschooling, the co-ops went away. And so I had just started homeschooling my children right before COVID. And the one thing that my kids really missed was friends.
Right.
So I was like, you know what, we'll just start getting them together. Well, I started planning with like just 4 moms, 9 kids, you know, little field trips or little get-togethers, and we'd have little parties. And it went from, in a half a year, it went from 9 kids to 30-some kids doing field trips. And then now we're up to 70-some kids and 40-some moms or something like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and now I'm just planning field trips every month. But in that time, my children are speaking to the adults when they see my children interact with their children.
Wow, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, like, so like when I say that if God only saved me to make my children impactful in the world in a positive way, it's enough. And I'm seeing that happen in this homeschool group, because we have a handful of the moms from our church that go, but the rest of them don't go to our church. But it's like this environment of mixing and seeing positives and seeing the light that's in us bleed out. So now when we do these things, we are sharing Jesus by just being who we are, and showing that, you know, you can love and accept everybody, and it doesn't matter where they are, what they're doing. You meet them where they're at, and that is what my children are doing, and that's what we're doing. So
wow,
it turned out really good.
Every time I hear your story, it's just like, I just get joy because it's beautiful.
Me too. Yeah,
it's so beautiful. And like, I didn't know you in the past, but now what I see, I'm like, how? Like, there's no way.
Yeah. And that's the best part. Like, when somebody looks at you and says, you were what? Like, that's good. That's good. Like, you wouldn't have even thought that. That's great, because that means that I've showed you that person's dead and gone.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. Like, it says in the word that he makes beauty for ashes, and that the old life is gone when we commit our heart and our life to Christ. Our old life, our old animal nature is gone, and we don't look like who we were before.
Right.
And so that can be for you too. Or if you are out of that, but you're ashamed of your past, your story, share that story with someone, and there's a freedom that takes place when you open up your mouth and share your testimony. And so I hope that this encouraged you. Christina, can you pray us out and kind of like, I want you to just really hone in on people that are coming out of this lifestyle, or that have, but they're afraid to share their story. Right. Because you said that you were afraid before to share the story. Yes. Because of what people thought. But isn't there a freedom?
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to let a testimony speak. And I thank you for Alexis and starting this so that she can show you that speaking life changes things.
Yes.
And so, Father, right now, I just speak to those that are lost, out there, broken, and think there's no other way, that this will speak to them and show them that there is more, that you can reach them, and that it doesn't matter where they are or what they're going through, that you are with them, and that you will be there when they're ready to walk to you.
Yes.
So, God, I just open the invitation for anybody right now that wants to come into Christ and wants to walk in, that God, you just open the door for them right now, for them to see that there is a way, and for them to find that connection, and that God, you make that intervention, make that person come to them so that they can say, hey, I want to introduce you to something, and it's called Jesus. And I want to show you a place that you can go, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you're coming from. And God, show them that fear has no hold, and that it is a liar, and that shame can be broken. And let this speak to you right now, that no matter where you're at, Shame has no hold of you, has no hold on you, that you can walk into a doors of a church and they will accept you and they will speak to you and they will love on you and you can be redeemed. So I open that invitation right now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. And Lord, I just break off every lie of the enemy that tries to tell them that they can't speak, that they can't share their story. I just break off the shame, the fear. And I just pray that you would just show them who they are in you so that they can know that there's redemption in their story, that there's redemption that you have for them, that you restore everything. And I thank you that we get to speak life and life more abundantly. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Christina, for coming on here and sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
I hope that this encouraged you, and I'm excited to hear what this has done for you. Thank you. Bye.